They said Mama Kosa died just before dusk. One moment, she was berating Ayanda for sweeping too slow, hurling dried fish bones at her bare feet. The next, she was on her knees, clutching her chest, bile foaming black from her lips. She collapsed by the fire with her eyes open and teeth clenched, her final breath curling through the room like smoke too thick to breathe. And even then, even in death, her mouth still worked itself into a snarl. Ayanda stood frozen, broom in hand, not daring to speak. The silence stretched long after the coughing stopped. When the neighbors were summoned, they gathered around the stiffening body, whispering and keeping their distance. Some held charms. Others just stared. No one moved to help. Not even to close her eyelids. The eldest of them, Baba Kalum, who once served as village priest, knelt close and touched Mama Kosa's forehead. He winced. Cold, but not like the dead should be. Still, he stood and made the sign of farewell, muttering, "Her time has come. May the gods sort her." "Who will bathe her?" asked one of the women from the back. Heads turned to Ayanda. She took a half-step backward. "No. I can't, she wasn't she's not." "She raised you," someone said. "She beat me," Ayanda snapped before she could stop herself. An uneasy murmur followed. No one met her eyes. But they all knew. Everyone in the village had heard the late-night cries, seen the bruises when Ayanda fetched water, watched her flinch at the smallest movement. Yet no one had ever interfered. Mama Kosa was feared. Not for her hands, though those were cruel enough, but for what people whispered, that she had once summoned things that lived underwater. That her first husband had vanished after bathing in the wrong stream. That her garden never failed, even when everyone else's crops turned to dust. "She has no other kin," Baba Kalum said finally. "The sacred bathing must be done by one of her house. Or her soul will wander." Ayanda opened her mouth, then closed it again. They weren't asking her. They were deciding. The village men carried the stiffening corpse to the old ritual hut by the riverbank. It was a stone hut no one used anymore, built during the old wars and kept only for death rituals too sacred, or too cursed, for the new burial ground. The walls were still stained with ash and dried herbs, the fire pit untouched since Ayanda was a child. They laid Mama Kosa on the stone slab at the center, her body wrapped loosely in a raffia cloth. Her limbs were bent strangely, frozen in the posture of her fall. Her mouth was slightly open, the tongue dark and still. Her fingers curled toward her own chest, like she had died trying to snatch her own heart. Ayanda stood at the threshold of the hut, bucket of river water in one hand, sponge and soap root in the other. Her stomach churned. They left her alone inside. No one dared to watch the bathing of a witch. She knelt beside the body and took a long, steadying breath. Her hands trembled. Every part of her wanted to run. But there was nowhere to go. She was 17, alone, and still bound by the last command the dead woman had ever given. Just an hour before dying, Mama Kosa had looked Ayanda in the eye and growled, "You'll clean me, girl. You'll wipe me even in death." Ayanda dipped the sponge into the warm water. The smell of herbs floated up, bitter and metallic. She reached out and began with the woman's legs, moving slowly, careful not to meet the dead eyes. The silence in the hut was suffocating. The only sound was water dripping onto the floor and the wet drag of the sponge across skin. Ayanda's thoughts drifted, to her mother's funeral years ago, when she had tried to touch the casket but Mama Kosa slapped her. To the night she had been locked in the storage shed for forgetting to boil yam. To the words she had never dared say aloud. She worked upward, across the stomach, then paused at the chest. The skin was ashy, but the veins beneath still looked blue, like river lines on a map. She told herself it was just her imagination. Just the way the light hit the skin. Just. She reached for the left arm to lift it. It moved. Not by much. Not a spasm. Not a twitch. It flexed, gently, as though the muscle beneath was still warm and listening. Her breath caught in her throat. She dropped the arm with a splash and stumbled backward, soap root flying from her hand. The arm fell limp again. Dead. Still. She stared at it, waiting. Nothing. The corpse's face remained frozen in that same sneer. Ayanda's heart pounded so loudly she could hear it echo off the stone walls. She wiped her hands on her wrapper, backing away inch by inch. Her eyes stayed locked on the arm. Had she imagined it? She stepped closer again. Slowly. Leaned in. Reached out. Touched the wrist. Warm. Not hot like fever. But not the waxy cold of death either. She pulled back, eyes wide. The corpse had breathed. She was sure of it now. It had been the faintest rise of the chest, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were watching closely. Ayanda turned to run. But her legs wouldn't move. Behind her, she heard a sound, not a breath, not a groan. A chuckle. Raspy. Wet. Coming from the dead woman's throat. And then nothing. Just the water still rippling in the basin. And the smile that hadn't been there before. The heat in the ritual hut thickened like old porridge. Ayanda dipped the sponge again, ignoring the way her hands still trembled. The faint chuckle she thought she'd heard was gone now. Just water. Just fear. Just exhaustion, maybe. She had told herself it was nerves. A slip of the mind. Dead bodies sometimes expelled air, Baba Kalum had said that once. But still, the memory of that arm flexing, that breath, that smile, it clung to her ribs like something sharp. Outside, the river hissed softly. But inside the hut, the silence pressed on her skull. Ayanda resumed the ritual, sponge dragging up Mama Kosa's left arm. She had never been this close to her stepmother without fear of being struck. And now, even in death, that fear clung like a second skin. Mama Kosa's flesh was beginning to soften. Not quite rot, but not untouched either. The skin loosened in places, especially near the elbows and fingers, curling like old yam skin. As Ayanda passed the sponge under the arm, she noticed faint red marks under the armpits, like rope burns. Her mouth went dry. Was she tied before she died? She pushed the thought aside and reached toward the face. She had to wash it. It was part of the ritual. The final cleansing. She raised the sponge to the forehead, and paused. The eyes were open. Not wide, just enough. Half-lidded. As if watching from a dream. Ayanda's breath caught. She leaned in. Just slightly. Yes, the eyes were open. Just enough to show the whites. They hadn't been earlier. She was sure of it. She set the sponge down carefully and leaned even closer. The pupils weren't moving. There was no focus. Just that glassy, heavy-lidded stare. But it was too alive. Ayanda reached forward and gently pressed one eyelid down. It slid shut. She exhaled in relief. Then the other eye blinked open. She stumbled back, knocking over the small wooden basin. Water spilled across the stone floor, swirling around her bare feet. Behind her, the door creaked. She turned. A hunched figure entered, the old washerwoman. Mamandum. She had been called last minute to oversee the ceremony, to make sure Ayanda completed it properly. In her youth, she had prepared bodies for warriors and chiefs. But now, bent and half-blind, she leaned on a cane and murmured to herself. "Is it done?" she rasped. Ayanda shook her head. "Almost." Mamandum stepped closer. Her wrinkled face twisted at the sight of the corpse. The eyes. "She keeps them open." "I tried to close them," Ayanda whispered. "They open again." Mamandum lowered herself beside the slab and took Mama Kosa's hand. She frowned, sniffed the air, and muttered something Ayanda couldn't catch. Then the old woman leaned in closer. Her fingers grazed the corpse's mouth. "She's warm," Mamandum whispered. "Too warm." "I told them," Ayanda said quickly. "I said she's not dead." No one believed me. The old woman stared at Mama Kosa's face, then leaned down to press her ear to the chest. A pause. Then she reeled back, eyes wide. "No," she hissed. "No, the dead don't smile." Ayanda followed her gaze. Mama Kosa's lips had curled, just slightly, into the faintest of smirks. Not enough to show teeth, but enough to mock. Mama Ndum dropped her cane and backed toward the door. "She's not clean. Not clean. Not finished. I won't stay here. The hut is cursed. She made it so." "Wait," Ayanda said, stepping after her. "What do I?" But the old woman was gone, shuffling out as fast as her limbs allowed, muttering charms under her breath. Ayanda turned back to the body. Now it was just her, alone with the corpse that watched. She stared into those half-open eyes again. This time she didn't try to close them. She picked up the sponge. Her knuckles were white. "If you can breathe," she muttered, "then speak. Say something." Silence. No chuckle. No whisper. But the tension hung thick, like it was waiting. She resumed her work. Down the right arm, slow and steady. Over the shoulder, to the neck, behind the ears. Mama Kosa's skin there was rough, like dried leather. A lifetime of harsh words had lived in that throat. And Ayanda remembered all of them. "You think you're better than me? You'll never be more than what I made you. Keep your mouth shut, girl, or I'll shut it for you." The worst were the nights. She was 6 the first time Mama Kosa locked her in the darkroom. It was the goat shed back then, before Mama Kosa had sold the goats and turned it into a punishment cell. No windows. Just a floor of dung and dust. Ayanda had cried until her voice gave out. She had learned to cry silently after that. She remembered the starvation too. Days without food. Weeks with only scraps. When her belly ached, she'd drink boiled leaves to fool her stomach. Once, she fainted while sweeping. Mama Kosa had kicked her awake. And now, here she was, washing that same woman's back. Ritual or not, it felt like a joke. She dipped the sponge again, this time drawing water across the collarbones. The sponge snagged briefly at the center of the chest, where the bone jutted slightly. Ayanda leaned closer. Was that movement? Her hands froze. The chest had just risen. Slightly. Very slightly. But it had risen. She dropped the sponge and stepped back. Her breath hitched. Again, there. The faintest rise. A breath. Followed by the tiniest exhale, almost like a sigh. The sound was so soft, she wondered if she imagined it. She took another step back. Mama Kosa's mouth twitched. Ayanda didn't scream. She couldn't. Her voice caught somewhere inside her. The mouth twitched again. Just once. Then went still. No sound. No breath. No blinking. No movement. But Ayanda stood frozen. Because the corpse had sighed. Because the corpse had smiled. And because, somehow, in that brief exhale, Ayanda had heard her name. Ayanda sat crouched in the corner of the ritual hut, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. The sponge lay discarded beside the basin, the water within still faintly rippling though nothing had touched it in minutes. A heavy, ghost-like steam rose from its surface, curling in the air like fingers searching for a throat. It had been hours now. Or maybe just minutes. Time had lost its grip on the space around her. She rocked slightly, breathing shallowly. "I didn't hear it," she whispered to herself. "I didn't hear it. It wasn't real." But her own voice sounded strange. Muffled. As though she were underwater. The steam thickened. She blinked, tried to clear her eyes. But the mist clung to her eyelashes, refused to leave. It wasn't natural. There was no fire beneath the basin anymore, she had kicked it over in panic earlier. Yet the water remained hot. Too hot. And the smell, not just herbs now. Something sour. Like copper. Like decay warmed under skin. Ayanda stared at her hands. The fingers were wrinkled, pruned, as though she'd been submerged for hours. The skin sagged along her knuckles. She flexed them and winced. They felt stiff, sore, ancient. She rubbed them hard against her wrapper, but the color didn't return. Just cold, she whispered. But it wasn't cold in the hut. It was stifling. She stood slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath her, and turned toward the door. It stood ajar, just slightly. She could see a thin sliver of moonlight spilling through. She took a breath, moved toward it, and pulled. Nothing. She pulled harder. The door didn't budge. Not inward. Not outward. She slammed her shoulder against it. Once. Twice. Again. Still nothing. She wasn't locked in. There was no latch. No bar. Just resistance. As if the hut itself refused to let her go. She backed away, chest heaving, skin slick with sweat. "Let me out," she cried. "I finished. I did it. I bathed her." Her voice died mid-sentence. The steam had grown denser. It now hovered like a living thing, drifting low across the floor, swirling around the slab where Mama Kosa lay. And then it moved. Not upward, but sideways. Toward Ayanda. She froze. The mist coiled around her legs, snaked up her arms, brushed her cheek. And in it, she heard it. Her voice. Not hers, but her own voice, repeated back to her. Only it wasn't quite right. It was older. Hollow. "Let me out," it echoed. "I finished. I bathed her." Then a pause. Then, in a voice that was entirely not hers, low, rattling, thick with centuries. "You are not done." Ayanda staggered back, hand clamped over her mouth. Her spine pressed against the cold stone wall. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." But the voice came again, this time louder. "You are not done." It came from everywhere. The walls. The mist. The air inside her lungs. Ayanda turned toward the slab. Mama Kosa still lay there, unmoving. Her limbs sprawled in the same lifeless angles. But her eyes were closed now. Ayanda hadn't closed them. The corpse had. She stepped forward, slowly. Each footstep echoed louder than it should. "Mama Kosa," she said, voice trembling. "If you're still inside, if something's in you. I need to know. I need." Her voice cracked. The steam around the corpse thickened, forming a swirling halo above its chest. Ayanda took another step. "Answer me." "Nothing." She stepped closer. Her wrinkled fingers reached toward the corpse's face. "Mama." The eyes snapped open. Ayanda gasped and stumbled back. The corpse's lips twitched. Then opened. And from deep inside, in a voice that did not belong to any living throat, came a rasped whisper. "Ayanda." It said her name. Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor, crawling backward with her palms scraping the stone. The corpse sat still, unmoving again, as though it hadn't spoken. But blood. Blood began to ooze from the ears. Slow, thick, and black-red. It trickled down the sides of the corpse's neck, seeping into the raffia cloth. Ayanda clutched her mouth to keep from screaming. She had to get out. Now. She stood, ran to the door, slammed both hands against it, but the wood felt like iron. The slit of moonlight was gone now. Total blackness beyond the cracks. The air grew colder. The mist rose higher. Then came the voice again, but not spoken this time. It was inside her mind. "You open the gate. You can't leave until it's shut." Ayanda turned around, breathing in short gasps. "What gate? What did she do?" There was no answer. Just a heartbeat, not hers, thudding slowly in the silence. Somewhere in the room. It sounded like it came from the slab. From Mama Kosa's chest. Ayanda stepped forward, unwilling but unable to stop herself. The corpse's body convulsed slightly. A tremor, barely noticeable, ran up one leg. The blood from the ears continued to flow, more now, pooling beneath the head. And then, a sigh. Long drawn out. Wet. The corpse exhaled. Ayanda covered her ears. Stop. Stop. You're dead. You're dead. But the whisper coiled around her once more. Not without you. Ayanda's fingers dug into her scalp. She could still feel the heat from the water on her skin, though no fire burned. Her reflection in the basin shimmered strangely, older, sunken-eyed, lips pale. She didn't know how long she stood there. A minute. An hour. Time didn't exist inside that hut anymore. Only the voice. Only the steam. Only the dead body that breathed like it was dreaming. And dreaming of her. Ayanda crouched near the basin, arms wrapped tight across her chest. Her heart had not slowed since the corpse whispered her name. The steam still lingered, thinner now, but clinging to the corners of the ritual hut like cobwebs soaked in breath. The hut felt colder than before, and yet her skin burned. She couldn't deny it anymore. Whatever had been laid on that stone slab was not truly dead. It breathed. It blinked. It knew her name. And now it bled. She forced herself to move. She walked slowly around the perimeter of the hut, dragging her fingers along the damp, cracked walls. They felt soft in some places, almost like skin. And on the far corner, behind the water jars and dried gourd ladles, she found them. Symbols. Carved into the stone. Not with a blade, but burned into the wall itself. 3 concentric circles with jagged slashes running through them. A serpent biting its own tail. An open eye drawn upside down. Her breath caught. These weren't village symbols. Not for burial. Not for peace. These were wards, twisted ones. Protective signs deliberately reversed, their meanings unmade. One of them, she remembered, was supposed to guard against spirits crossing over. But reversed, it invited them. Ayanda's fingers hovered over the markings. She remembered once, years ago, waking in the middle of the night to whispers outside her door. Mama Kosa had thought her asleep. The woman had been kneeling in the courtyard, facing the river, mumbling into a basin of water that shimmered like moonlight. She had chanted a name then. Or not a name, a title. Those beneath the river. Ayanda had never forgotten it. Back then, she thought it was just more of her stepmother's madness. But now it made sense. The chants. The herbs that smelled too sharp. The way birds never landed on their roof. Mama Kosa had been preparing for something. Practicing. Not for death. But for return. Ayanda shivered. She faked her death before, someone once whispered in the market. Poisoned herself halfway. Slept for 3 days in the yam field just to punish her husband. She ate river bones, another had said. The kind that sing when you burn them. She spoke backward to her reflection. Ayanda had dismissed them all as cruel stories about a cruel woman. Now they rang true. And worse, Ayanda remembered something else. The old stories. The ones her real mother told her before Mama Kosa came. Of the half-dead, those who found ways to slip between this world and the next. People who lay still for 3 days and nights, mouths full of grave water, rising not fully alive, not fully gone. It was forbidden, not just in their village, but across the valleys. Because once opened, the passage between life and death didn't always close. Some said they returned mad. Others said they returned changed. With things following them back. Ayanda turned back to the slab. Mama Kosa hadn't moved again. But her skin looked different now. Not grayer, pinker. Like blood had begun circulating. Like the bath had worked. And maybe that was the point. Maybe Ayanda's hands had been used for more than cleansing. Maybe she was part of the ritual, the final step. She turned to the water basin. It was still warm. Still steaming. And in its surface, she saw herself. Only it wasn't right. Her reflection stared back. Same wrapper. Same face. Same wrinkles on her fingertips. But the eyes, they gleamed darker. The lips, curved upward. Into a grin. Ayanda didn't move. But the reflection did. It smiled wide, slow and sure, revealing a row of teeth stained black. Ayanda stumbled back, knocking over the bowl. Water splashed across the floor and snuffed out the last ember near the door. Darkness crept in. The reflection was gone now, but the image stayed seared behind her eyes. Not her. Not anymore. Something else had looked through. And it had smiled. She backed away slowly, eyes darting to the corpse again. "Mama Kosa," she whispered. "What did you bring back?" No answer. But from outside the hut, the river hissed, louder now, like it surged against the bank in warning. Ayanda felt the weight of the carved symbols behind her. They weren't just twisted by mistake. Someone, she, had done it intentionally. To open something. The hut wasn't just a place of ritual anymore. It was a gate. And Ayanda had crossed its threshold with her own hands. Now her skin felt wrong. Her fingertips tingled like they remembered a spell they never learned. The scent of herbs she didn't recognize was stuck in her nostrils. And the voice. "You are not done." It echoed again in her chest. Ayanda sank to her knees. Because now she understood. Mama Kosa hadn't just faked her death. She had made herself die. Briefly. Precisely. And in doing so, she had pulled something through the thin veil between worlds. Something that wanted to finish the ritual. Something that smiled. With Ayanda's face. Ayanda pressed her hand against the wooden door once more. The wood remained unmoving, cold to the touch. Her fingers were numb now, her skin still wrinkled like water-worn cloth. She stood silently in the steam-drenched hut, pulse throbbing behind her eyes, ears filled with a roar that didn't come from the river. Behind her, the air shifted. A ripple. A breath. A wet gasp. She turned. Mama Kosa's body sat up. The raffia cloth slid down her shoulders, water trickling from her mottled skin in slow streams. Her hair clung to her scalp like seaweed. Her chin tilted slightly, and then her head rose in one jerking movement until her blackened eyes stared directly at Ayanda. There were no whites left, just glossy, ink-dark orbs, too deep, too still. Like wells with no bottom. Ayanda backed up until her spine hit the wall. Mama Kosa's mouth parted, and her voice came, not from her throat, but as if from the floor beneath them. "Child." Ayanda said nothing. Her teeth were clenched tight. Her mind, screaming. Mama Kosa stood slowly. Water poured from her body in thick sheets. It should have looked clumsy. But she rose like smoke does, slow, impossible, and wrong. "I told you," she whispered, her voice curling like incense, "you would clean me, even in death." "I won't," Ayanda breathed. "You're not alive. You're not even." Mama Kosa laughed. A short, rattling sound that turned into a cough midway, spraying dark water across the floor. Her grin spread wider as she stepped forward. "I'm more alive now than I ever was in that rotten village," she said, her voice deepening. "They feared me. But they never understood what I served." Ayanda's back pressed harder against the stone wall. "What did you bring back?" Mama Kosa's eyes narrowed with delight. "A pact sealed long ago. I gave them offerings. Birds. Goat blood. Daughters." Ayanda's stomach turned. "I needed the right vessel," Mama Kosa went on. "A girl born from fire and water. And I found her. You. My last offering. My final ritual. Bathed in death's water by her own hands." "I'm not your daughter," Ayanda hissed. Mama Kosa tilted her head. "You are what I made you. And now you'll complete what I began." Ayanda bolted for the door again. It still wouldn't move. She spun around, her chest heaving. Mama Kosa was stepping off the stone slab now. Her bare feet slapped wetly on the floor. She walked without hurry, as though certain nothing could escape her. Ayanda grabbed a gourd bowl and hurled it. It shattered against Mama Kosa's shoulder. She didn't flinch. Another step. Ayanda looked around frantically for anything, and saw it, the old burial veil. Hung over a nail. The one Mama Kosa had been wrapped in earlier. Thick with old death threads. Soaked with oils. Her mother had once told her, veils bind the soul as it leaves. Burn them before the spirit returns or it will claim what's nearest. Ayanda snatched it from the wall and ran toward the fire pit. Only faint embers remained, but it would be enough. Mama Kosa saw her. Her grin faltered. No, she growled. Ayanda dropped the veil onto the coals and blew hard. Flames sparked, then surged. The veil caught. It curled instantly, blackening, then crumbling into red ash. Mama Kosa screamed. The sound cracked the air like thunder. Her body spasmed violently, limbs flailing, spine arched so far back it seemed she might snap. Ayanda backed away, shielding her face from the heat. But the veil didn't burn like cloth. It disintegrated. Into ash that rose into the air, and flew. The ash did not scatter. It twisted mid-air, spinning and tightening like a snake. Ayanda stared in confusion, then horror, as the ash suddenly shot toward her. It wrapped around her wrists first. Burning and binding. She screamed, tried to shake it off, but it clung to her skin like branding. The ash circled her ankles next, forcing her to stumble forward. Then around her chest. Her throat. Her mouth. She felt her knees, gasping. She couldn't speak. The ash tightened like rope woven from shadow. Across the hut, Mama Kosa rose once more. Her grin was back, wider now. Blood trickled from her ears, but she looked pleased. I told you, she said. The veil binds the soul, but not mine. Ayanda trembled, struggling against the invisible weight holding her. You burned it, Mama Kosa whispered, stepping closer. And now it knows you. Now it claims you. I didn't mean, Ayanda tried to say, but the words came out choked. Mama Kosa knelt beside her, brushing wet fingers along Ayanda's cheek. Shoo, she whispered. The river gave me breath again. But it needs a vessel. I will wear your life like a second skin. Ayanda flinched. You think I beat you out of cruelty? Mama Kosa said. No. I was softening you. Breaking you. So your spirit would stay low. So it wouldn't resist when the time came. Ayanda's throat tightened as her vision blurred. You were never meant to survive this, Mama Kosa said softly. You were meant to carry me. She placed her hand over Ayanda's chest. And suddenly Ayanda felt it. A pull. Inside her. As though her very self, her name, her voice, her being, was unraveling. The steam thickened. The hut trembled. Outside, the river roared. Ayanda's fingers clawed at the ash binds around her arms, but they didn't break. And in the corner of her eye, her reflection in the broken basin. It smiled again. Black eyes. Pale lips. Not her anymore. And it mouthed. Let her in. Ayanda screamed, but no sound came out. Because Mama Kosa had taken her voice. Her breath. Her will. And in that moment, as the veil's ash wrapped around her heart, Ayanda understood. The ritual wasn't about reviving Mama Kosa. It was about replacing her. Ayanda lay crumpled near the fire pit, her breath ragged, skin stinging from the ash veils that still coiled like snakes around her wrists and ankles. Her limbs felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. The basin water had turned still again, too still, like glass that reflected nothing. The hut groaned. The air inside shifted. And then came footsteps, slow, dragging, wet with rot. Mama Kosa emerged from the steam-drenched shadows, half covered by the raffia cloth, her skin glistening with a strange sheen. She walked with stiff, unnatural grace. Her knees bent at odd angles, her spine cracked when she moved, but she moved nonetheless. She was no longer just a corpse. Nor entirely a woman. She was something in between, a husk clinging to life with borrowed breath and stolen power. She crouched beside Ayanda and smiled with what little her face could still move. "You disobeyed," she said, her voice less human now. It was thick, as though spoken through river mud. "You tried to end the ritual before it was complete." Ayanda tried to pull herself away, but her hands barely obeyed. Her voice scraped her throat when she spoke. "You're already alive. You don't need me anymore." Mama Kosa chuckled. "Alive? No, child. I'm occupied. But not whole. Not yet." She leaned in close, and Ayanda could smell the rot beneath the herbs, a sweet, thick stench of meat gone sour. "You were the bridge," she whispered. "Your hands pulled me back. But your soul must anchor me. The ritual isn't over until your spirit seals the gate." Ayanda gritted her teeth. "I'll never finish it." Mama Kosa's smile widened. "If you don't," she said gently, "you'll take my place. In the corpse bed. In the silence. In the forgetting. You'll lie there, stiff and blind, and I'll walk out wearing your voice." Ayanda's blood turned to ice. The hut around them began to blur. The walls rippled like heat mirages. The shadows moved with intention now, slithering up the corners, crawling along the ceiling beams. The door was no longer visible, swallowed in smoke and trembling darkness. Time slowed. The fire no longer crackled. The river no longer roared. They were nowhere. Between. Mama Kosa stood and dragged Ayanda upright with surprising strength. Her fingers dug into Ayanda's arms, her nails yellow and too sharp. She guided her back to the slab where the ritual had begun. "Finish what you started," Mama Kosa ordered. "You've bathed the head, the chest, the arms. Only the legs remain. Complete it, or decay where you stand." Ayanda stared at the corpse that wasn't fully a corpse. Mama Kosa lay back onto the stone, smiling with eyes that didn't blink. Her legs, swollen now, covered in dark bruises and pale veins, waited. Ayanda looked down at her own hands. They were trembling. But worse, the skin on her palms had begun to pucker again. Not just wrinkled from water. But gray. Peeling. Thin flaps of skin had loosened near her fingertips. Her breath caught. She touched her cheek, and felt the same thing. Dry. Dead. "No," she whispered. "No." The curse was shifting. Her refusal to complete the ritual hadn't stopped it, it had turned it. Mama Kosa's laugh echoed through the room, high and brittle. "The river doesn't wait for obedience, child. It simply claims. Finish, and you keep your name. Refuse, and your soul fades from your bones, inch by inch." Ayanda's knees buckled, but she caught herself. Finish it? Help her? Bind the demon inside her forever? Or lie in her place? Tears burned in Ayanda's eyes, but she wiped them away with rotting fingers. She picked up the sponge. Mama Kosa purred in delight. "Good girl." Ayanda stepped forward. She dipped the sponge in the still warm water. Her hands shook. Her skin cracked slightly as she wrung the sponge. The first touch of sponge to leg made her gag. The flesh felt too soft, bloated and damp. It squelched under the cloth. She continued. The right shin. The left knee. The feet were blackened and cracked, with nails falling off. She tried not to look. But with every stroke, Ayanda felt something being drawn from her. She could feel it, not just sweat, but essence leaving her fingers. And worse, her own calves began to ache. She looked down. The skin on her legs was peeling now. First in fine layers, like parchment. Then deeper. Raw, open flesh beneath. She gasped and staggered. Mama Kosa chuckled. The gate must have one body. One soul. Ayanda looked down at her own arms again, blotched now, veins rising beneath translucent skin. Her teeth chattered. She was becoming the thing on the slab. With a scream of defiance, she threw the sponge across the room. No, she cried. You don't get to choose. Mama Kosa's grin dropped. Ayanda grabbed the rusted ritual knife from the altar shelf nearby, used long ago for ceremonial bloodletting, and pointed it at the stone basin. I'll bleed it dry. I'll empty the water, she said, before I give you the rest of me. Mama Kosa stood slowly, something like fear twitching in her smile. You won't survive, she hissed. Then neither will you. Ayanda's voice trembled, but her grip did not. Because if she was going to die, she would do it breaking the ritual, not completing it. Mama Kosa lunged. In the shadows with her. Ayanda's back struck the stone wall as Mama Kosa lunged, all bones and bile and screaming shadow. The hut, already twisted beyond sense, pulsed around them like a living thing. The shadows moved faster now, flickering like hands reaching from behind the walls. The fire was gone, but the light remained, blue and shivering, as if the river itself had slithered inside. Ayanda clutched the ritual knife, its dull blade shaking in her hand. She could barely feel her fingers now. The rot had crept up her forearms. Her skin flaked and peeled in strips, like bark sloughing from a dead tree. The pain was duller than before, but that was worse. Numbness meant she was losing the battle. Across the room, Mama Kosa writhed, her form half submerged in a pool of water that had poured from nowhere. Her legs bent the wrong way now. Her arms elongated and shriveled with every breath, like something inside her was reshaping her from the inside out. Ayanda's mind screamed, I am not ready to die like this. And then, through the chaos, came a sound from within her memory, soft, fragile, full of warmth. A voice. Not Mama Kosa's. Her mother's. A lullaby. She hadn't thought of it in years. Not since she was 5 or 6. Before her mother had vanished one rain-drenched morning. Before her father had married Mama Kosa, who claimed Ayanda as her own and made her forget every scent, every song, every whisper that belonged to the woman who bore her. The tune came suddenly, like it had waited all this time behind her tongue. Nalail, Nalail, sleep beneath the fig. What walks with no shadow shall flee if you sing. Ayanda's lips trembled. She opened her mouth. And began to hum. Mama Kosa froze. The air snapped. The steam hissed and recoiled, like it had been burned. Ayanda kept going. The words rose clearer now, shaped by instinct and a kind of ancestral muscle memory. Nalail, Nalail, where river songs die. Unbind the mouth, let the water lie. Mama Kosa screamed, not like a human. Her voice fractured the air. Her eyes rolled white as she clutched her stomach. Her skin blistered, cracking down her cheeks. Black ooze burst from her nose. Her spine jerked, bones popping loud enough to echo. The walls of the hut shook. The roof groaned. The floorboards rippled like they were melting. Ayanda stepped forward, singing louder. She didn't understand how she remembered the chant. Only that it had lived in her bones. Her real mother, she remembered now, was a ritual singer. She used her voice to bless fields, to close soul gates, to break death bonds. The elders whispered she was dangerous. She died not long after Mama Kosa arrived. Everyone said fever. But Ayanda knew better now. Mama Kosa had taken her place. In the house. In the family. And, it seemed, in the ritual. The shadows clawed at Ayanda's feet now, trying to silence her. But she lifted her chin and sang the last line. Nalail, Nalail, send her back blind. The slab exploded. Water surged upward, dragging Mama Kosa with it like a drowned leaf caught in a whirlpool. She screamed, flailing. Her limbs stretched into mist. Her face collapsed inward, as though the bones had forgotten how to hold shape. The hut began to collapse. Not with wood or fire, but inward. Like space itself was folding. The air pulled at Ayanda, yanking her hair, her breath, her voice. She screamed, but it was joy this time. Until a sound stopped her. A whisper. From the pit of the unraveling hut. I waited for you, for so long. Ayanda's body stiffened. The voice had not come from Mama Kosa. It had come from inside Ayanda. She clutched her stomach. Her chest. Her head. Images struck her, flashing like lightning behind her eyes. An altar. A bowl of blood. A knife. Her own infant cries echoing in a circle of old stone, and Mama Kosa's face, younger, eyes wide with hunger. Ayanda stumbled back, choking on breath. She wasn't adopted. She wasn't found. She had been chosen. You were meant to die, the voice whispered from within. But you did not. She remembered now. She had been the first sacrifice. The original offering to the river. A ritual gone wrong. A soul too stubborn. Her mother, the singer, had stolen her from the stone slab and fled in the night, hiding her beneath lullabies and new names. And when Mama Kosa found her again, years later, she disguised it as a marriage to Ayanda's father. She had watched Ayanda grow, pretending. And waited. Waited until she was old enough to finish what had begun. Ayanda collapsed to her knees as the hut cracked open behind her. Through the shards of collapsing shadow, she saw water rising into the sky, a reverse waterfall, dragging everything unnatural back into the chasm. Mama Kosa screamed, her body shredded into strips of light and ash. Ayanda clenched her teeth and dug her nails into the soft earth beneath the hut. No, she growled. You don't get to take me twice. And she began the chant again, backward this time. Unmaking each syllable. With every word, her body burned. The peeling skin fell away. The rot slowed. The shadows recoiled. The hut screamed with her. And then... silence. The steam was gone. The floor was dirt again. The walls were stone. The air was clear. Ayanda opened her eyes and looked around. The hut was empty. No corpse. No basin. No symbols. Only a faint circle of ash where the slab had been. She stood, legs weak, arms raw but whole. She walked to the threshold. The door creaked open, like nothing had ever sealed it. Outside, the river ran quiet, silver in the moonlight. She looked down at her hands. They were hers again. But she was not who she had been. She had remembered who she was. Not Ayanda the orphan. Not the stepdaughter. Not the servant. She was the girl who survived the river once. And now, she had sent it back. The river whispered again. Ayanda stood at the edge of the shattered hut, her feet raw and bleeding from the ash-lined floor. The hut behind her had collapsed into itself, leaving nothing but a ring of burned soil and strange black moss. The moon hung above, quiet and watchful. The village was gone, not in ruin, just faded. As if the world outside the ritual had been peeled back and put away. Only the river remained. Wide. Endless. Humming. Ayanda stared at the current, and it felt like it stared back. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. Because now she knew. She had been born under chance. Raised under lies. Named under silence. Her soul, stolen before her first breath could settle. Mama Kosa hadn't just beaten her to break her, she had shaped her like clay, preparing her to one day finish the ritual. A daughter forged from ashes. A vessel tempered with cruelty. Obedient hands trained to serve. The woman had never planned to live forever on her own. She had planned to wear Ayanda's body like a new skin. Ayanda closed her eyes. She remembered the way her mother had sung her name once, hidden behind a fig tree, voice trembling but soft. Zuberi. That was it. Her true name. Not Ayanda. Zuberi. Strength in the old tongue. the name her mother had given her before Mama Kosa smothered it. Ayanda, Zuberi, stepped forward. The river hissed as her feet entered it. The water welcomed her. In her chest, something cracked open. Like a jar that had been sealed too long. She took a deep breath and spoke aloud. Zuberi. Daughter of Nia. Blood of voice. Soul not borrowed. I call myself back. The current stirred. A low hum rose from beneath the surface. Then, voices. Dozens. Hundreds. River spirits that had waited in silence, now answering. They whispered her name like reeds in the wind. Zuberi. 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 The water pulsed. Then parted. And something rose from it. Mama Kosa's corpse. It wasn't whole anymore. Not entirely human. Her skin bulged in places, waterlogged and splitting. Worms crawled from her neck. Her face had fused with something else, a second jawbone beneath the skin, a second pair of eyes forming under her cheeks. She screamed without lips, her body stretching wider than it should, taller than bones allowed. She had refused to die. The river had rejected her. But she would not let go. You cannot unmake me. Mama Kosa shrieked. You are mine, your soul was a promise. Zuberi stepped into the deeper water, ignoring the sting. No, she said firmly. You stole what was never yours. She raised her arms and began to chant again, not her mother's song, not the reversal spell, but her own name, laced with every truth, every scar, every moment she'd been silenced. Zuberi. 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 Mama Kosa screamed louder. Her body convulsed. Blistered. Split. A gaping hole tore open in her chest, and from it poured a black liquid, thicker than blood, swirling with faces of the half-dead. Zuberi moved fast. She grabbed the edge of the hollowed ritual tub half-sunken at the river's edge. The same tub that had once held the death water from Mama Kosa's bathing. She tipped it upright, and it filled with river water, dark, sacred, unforgiving. Mama Kosa stumbled toward her. Zuberi waited. Then, with one cry, not of fear but fury, she shoved Mama Kosa into the tub. The corpse screamed. The water roared. It wasn't boiling, but it burned. Smoke rose from the tub. The river shuddered like it had been stabbed. Zuberi leaned over, chanting, forcing her soul forward. I call myself back. You can't hold what's not yours. But Mama Kosa's corpse thrashed violently. Rotting arms shot upward, grabbing Zuberi by the wrists. Zuberi screamed. She tried to pull back, but the hands were strong. Wet. Cold. Mama Kosa's body began to pull her in. Zuberi dug her heels into the mud, but her footing slipped. Her knees slammed into the edge of the tub. The river spirits whispered madly now, voices clashing like drums. The water foamed around them. Then it happened. Their faces merged. For a moment, one breathless, terrifying moment, Zuberi looked into the tub and saw herself. Not as she was now, but as Mama Kosa. Smiling. Grinning with Zuberi's eyes. The grip around her wrists tightened. She felt her soul stretch like it was being unstitched. One body. Two souls. One must remain. Zuberi screamed into the storm. And then she remembered something else, her mother's last words before vanishing into that final night. If you ever forget who you are, just say your name out loud, even if no one believes it. Your soul will always answer. Zuberi gasped, then roared. Zuberi! The water exploded in light. A white flash. A silence so loud it split the air. Then, stillness. Zuberi lay panting in the mud, the tub cracked beside her. Mama Kosa's body was gone. Not floating. Not sinking. Just vanished. The river calmed. The fog lifted. Zuberi stood on trembling legs, drenched but whole. For the first time in 17 years, she felt complete. Her name was hers. Her body was hers. Her soul, no longer tied, no longer caged, had returned. She had taken back what was stolen. And made sure the body that wouldn't die had drowned in its own stolen breath. The sun rose over the village of Anabe like it always did, quiet, golden, casting long shadows across the riverbank. But something was different now. The birds did not sing near the bathing hut. The fish refused to swim close to shore. And no one stepped near the ritual grounds. Not since the night the smoke rose in spirals, black as mourning cloth. Not since the girl vanished. When the elders arrived at dawn, they found the hut shattered and silent. The air was thick with the scent of river salt and burned herbs. The stone basin where the bodies were bathed had cracked in two. The veils were gone. The water jars, shattered. But worst of all, the floor. It bled. Not red. But black. From its broken stones, a slow, bubbling trickle of ink-colored water oozed upward, curling into strange shapes before sinking back into the ground. It hissed when touched. It whispered when ignored. Some claimed to hear names in it. Some said they heard breathing. The elders sealed the grounds that very morning. With charms. With salt. With silence. The old burial rites were declared cursed. Never again would daughters bathe their dead. Never again would the river be offered bodies to keep its peace. They buried no one near the banks again. But the tale, the tale spread like fire in dry grass. It was told in hushed tones under the fig tree. At the grinding stone. In the late hush of night. A story of a girl, 17, quiet, unwanted, who was forced to bathe her stepmother's corpse. Only the corpse wasn't dead. They say the girl obeyed. That she completed the ritual even as the dead woman breathed. Even as the eyes stayed open. Even as her own name slipped from memory. Some said the girl died in that hut. Others said she traded places with what lay on the slab. Still others, the oldest ones, with cloudy eyes and trembling hands, swore they saw her return. Walking up the river path the night after the hut collapsed. Barefoot. Drenched. Her hair tangled with twigs and beads. Her eyes too still. Her smile too sharp. She said nothing. Only bowed her head and walked through the village like a ghost through smoke. They say she still lives on the edge of the water, near where the reeds grow tall and thick. Where the ground stays damp no matter how hot the season gets. A little round hut sits there now. New. Small. Crooked. And in it, her. Ayanda. Or something wearing her face. She speaks little, this girl. Doesn't come to market. Doesn't answer when the children call. But she hums. Always hums. Low. Steady. Familiar. The old lullaby, some say. The one mothers used to sing before the river took that too. In her lap, they say, she keeps a carved wooden bowl, the same kind used in the bathing rites. And every night, after the sun dies behind the hills, she fills it with water from the river. It never runs dry. And she washes. Cloth in hand, quiet and patient, she wipes and scrubs. Not her own arms. Not her own legs. But something. Something no one can see. Some say it's Mama Kosa's ghost, clinging still to the last touch of ritual. Others say it's the many dead the river has taken, returning for a cleansing they never received. But the bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, whisper another theory. That the girl is no longer Ayanda. That in the final moment, when life and death battled for her soul, something merged. And now she is neither. Not corpse. Not living. Just the bridge. The river's hand. The final washer. The girl who bathes what refuses to die. Children who stray too close to the water's edge at dusk are quickly scolded. Because the grown-ups know the signs. They know what happens when a girl with unfinished rituals lingers too long. If you hear humming, the elders say, do not turn around. If you see a bowl floating by itself, don't touch it. And if a girl with riverweed in her hair smiles at you without blinking, run. They call her many things now. The washer. The corpse girl. River's mouth. But most know her simply by the name that started it all. The girl who washed the dead. And on some nights, when the moon is high and the mist rolls down from the hills, her hum rises louder than the frogs in the wind. It floats across the water, past the fields, into the dreams of those who still remember. And always, it ends the same way, with the sound of water wrung from cloth. And the soft, steady whisper of someone scrubbing a body that refuses to stay buried.